Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sheikh, Rash and viewers. So today we're coming together for a video, inshallah, a very important topic in this video, which, while it is sometimes quite a tricky one to navigate with, a lot of different perspectives and different opinions, it's a video that we think is essential to address in our time and how we go forward, and a good look at our tradition, and as well as critiquing it and moving forward, inshallah. The topic of today's video is going to be around the concept of scholarship, accountability, and our rulers, modern day rulers previously, and how our interactions should be with them and our relationships should be with them. So that is the topic of today, inshallah. We're here with Dr. Muhammad al-Masri to get his perspective and his views on this topic. So naturally, there are many views across the spectrum, depending on who you affiliate yourself with and what kind of schooling you have. It's quite a big topic and a very delicate topic to tackle, but again, we truly believe it's fundamental, and that's why we're coming together to make this video, inshallah. So, Sheikh, there's a number of, I would say, key points I want to try and address in this video regarding, these topics. Some of them being, first and foremost, millions of Muslims, have been killed, displaced, spread around the world because of these, regimes, these scholars siding with them, and these, modern day rulers. It would be a disservice to not address this, as, it has affected the Ummah at large and continues to affect us. And I feel it's a personal obligation for us to be able to address these topics. Also, the idea that these topics are so contentious now that they've also been made as Qat'i points of Aqidah, almost, where people are using these topics to, throw people out of a manhaj, or throw people out of even to the most extreme, out of the fold of Islam, which I think needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm. And as Muslims, we also emphasize greatly the protection of the downtrodden in our society, the oppressed of our society, and making sure we're not having a hand in, any of this oppression by having incorrect support, of any type of regimes or scholars siding with these regimes. So I think that's why it's essential for us to clarify what our perspective should be from a textual point of view, and what do the texts say, what does Rasulullah ﷺ say, and what is actually being said about this topic, and not a single narrative about the topic, inshallah. So I have quite a few different key points, talking points, I would want to go through, but I think I'll start from the beginning. And I'll just pose a question to you, Sheikh, in terms of fundamentally, what do the texts say about our relationship with rulers and regimes as a whole, as average Muslims? What should our interaction be with them and our perspective be of our rulers?
This is a very wide, big question, actually. Concerning the rule, let's start with the rulers first. That's Ul Il Amr. There are only two ayahs in the Quran mentioning Ul Il Amr. As a matter of fact, actually, the Quran does not address Ul Il Amr. It addresses even how to show Ul Al Amr. It addresses in a negative form, the request of Bani Israel to appoint a king when they went to the prophet. We know the prophet is Samuel, like in the book of Samuel, the first book of Samuel, this whole story with Talut. The Quran mentioned him, his name by attribute, the tall one, the extremely tall one. His name is Saul. And mention the story relatively neutral, but obviously the connotation are very negative, that they asked for a king. But the Old Testament shows clearly that they were rebuked for that, and there was a very long discussion with their prophet. But in the Quran, usually all addressed all to all the believers or to the messenger. And when this to the messenger, they addressed to him and to the believers also, unless there is a specific comparing evidence to regard it as addressing him in specifically for himself only. So his address to him is addressed to his ummah and to any believer, and also address him as a messenger, also as a head of state, unless there's an evidence that's addressed to him as a head of state only. So that's it concerning rulership in Islam. So really the overblown proportion of imam and khilafah and so on, like we find ongoing from the time of Muawiyyah onward, and then in the books like Mawardi and Abu Ya'la al-Farra, al-Ahkam al-Sultaniyya, where the Khalifa has been blown a little bit more out of proportion, really excessively, is not what Quran specifically, or also not Sunnah indicate. Sunnah indicates really put stress on the community of the bigger Jama'a, not the head of the Jama'a. The head of Jama'a is a necessary position. It has certain specification, it has certain allegiance and certain bay'ah and things like that, but it's really the Jama'a is the one who has the power. The Jama'a is the one who rules. The Jama'a to whom you should be allied and should be alleged to, and you should not separate from Khuruj min al-Jama'a, which is a separate crime than breaking the covenant with the Khalif, or the head of the state, the man whom he gave bay'ah. So in the Quran we have only أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا رسوله وأولي الأمر منكم فإن تنازعتم فيه فردوه إلى الله وإلى الرسول إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر ذلك خير وأحسن تأويلا. And another question concerning the issues of peace, war and peace, or security and fear. إذا جاءهم أمر من الأمن أو الخوف أذاعوا به ولو ردوه إلى رسول أولي الأمر منهم لعلمه الذين يستنبطونه منهم. If they receive any news about war and peace, about security, like for example, there's a rumor that an army is coming. Some of the munafiqeen, they go to the masjid and say, we hear that an army is coming, we're in danger, and so on. That's not the way a believer should behave. Issues of security, an army coming, cyber security problem, and so on, should be reported first to the authority. Ila Rasul, the messenger is not anymore with us as a head of state. Ul Il Amr minhum, those who are in charge with the public, with the affairs of security and khawf, and security, and how to protect from fear, to prepare for war, to prepare for security measures, and so on. Then these will be able to analyze this news and see what's it before spreading it as a rumor and try to instigate the public to go in the state of fear or something like that. So this is the only places where Ul Amr mentioned in the Quran. The first ayah is the master ayah. That's أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا رسوله أولي الأمر منكم فإن تنازعتم فيها فردوه إلى الله ورسوله. So the obedience to Allah is an absolute obedience. The obedience to the messenger is also prefaced by أطيعوا الرسول, obey the messenger, stressing that the obedience to the messenger is the same rank like the obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason for that is that he's infallible. He is actually reporting the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So his orders are the orders of Allah. So it is just to clarify that the way the commands of Allah or the obedience to Allah will be executed in the real universe here, where we not in the metaphysical reality, in this reality here, is by obeying the messenger, because he is the conduit. He is the one who brings the message, bringing the command. So there is no difference between أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا رسول. It's actually أطيعوا Allah. But how you أطيعوا Allah? Usually, normally, most human beings are not addressed by Allah directly, or they are addressed through the messenger, Al-Rasul, أطيعوا الرسول. And that his obedience is absolute, is taken care of, that Allah made it on him that he is infallible in reporting his commands. That's the infallibility of the messengers. Generally, any messenger. This final messenger and any messenger. ما أرسلنا من رسول من قبلك إلا ليطاع بإذن الله. We did not send any messenger before you except that he must be obeyed by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, it would no permission to obey anybody without Allah's permission. So this is the absolute part of obedience, because the obedience to Allah is absolute. Is actually it's like it's one coin with two sides. One side is the sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the ultimate sovereign. He's the owner. He's the commander. He's the ultimate sovereign by necessity of reason. By being the necessary existing, the one who created those creation who are capable of receiving orders, are receiving, complying, or having a quality of complying or non-complying, meaning have free will. He created for what? For what purpose? For himself. He did not create. There's no other deity. There's no other entity in existence he is creating for. It's not like the Japanese car manufacturer manufacturing a car to be sold to an American or to a British or to the Saudis. No, it is created for himself, for a purpose designed by himself. And he mentioned the purpose elsewhere in the Quran, in the scripture. But that's not the point. That means because he's the absolute owner, he's the owner, he's the creator, he deserves absolute surrender and obedience. The flip side of the coin is that for the created being who has capability of reason, sufficient reason, or sufficient free will, so that he can obey or disobey, is that he is obliged to obey. I mean, with obliged here, rational obligation, not Sharia obligation. It becomes a Sharia obligation when the messenger comes to tell you, you have to obey Allah and you will be accounted Yawm al-Qiyamah. Then it becomes a Sharia obligation. So for that's only a rational obligation. You can't comply as a rational being with it. It's nice, it's good, it's beautiful rationally, but there's no accounting Yawm al-Qiyamah for that. Only when you receive the command that they will be accounting Yawm al-Qiyamah, then it becomes a Sharia obligation. Sharia obligations are those who you have to fulfill, otherwise you will be questioned Yawm al-Qiyamah with them. That's the Sharia obligation, not rational obligation. That's rational, something else, dictated by reason. That's the only obedience and only sovereignty in the surrounding reality, in the whole universe, in the existing reality, or in this current state of affairs. That's the only there. Nobody else deserves any obedience whatsoever.
Oh, so there's no obligation to be for our context of today, our rulers to obey them. Yeah,
no obedience to parents, no obedience to trees, no obedience to mountains, no obedience to kings, no obedience to nobody. You have no right to obey anybody except with Allah's permission. And this is stressed by the ayah, وما أرسلنا من قبلك رسول إلا ليطاع بإذن الله, by the permission of Allah. Without Allah's permission for obedience, the obedience is a major crime. It's actually a violation of Tawheed. Because Tawheed meaning surrender to Allah completely and rejection and surrender to anybody else. Rejecting obedience to anybody else. So it's a fundamental philosophical point. That's the meaning of La ilaha illallah. Right? There's no entity who should deserve absolute obedience by its own being and by virtue of his own, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any other entity does not deserve an obedience, actually deserve rejection. You have to reject anyone who gives a command without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taghut. It's crossing his limit. So this is fundamental. That's the foundation. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave permission for the messenger. We said because he took on himself that they are infallible. So the messenger said, you have to do this and this and this. This is essentially Allah saying you have to do this and this. The messenger is just a physical reality in front of you, communicating to you that command. That's it. That's the one. That's clear. We don't need to. But what about Ul Il Amr? Ul Il Amr is being obeyed by the permission of Allah, but they are not infallible, and there may be a dispute with them, and their obedience is a branch from the obedience of Allah and His Messenger. Meaning, it is impossible to envisage that they will be obeyed if they are given a command contrary to Allah's commandments. That cannot be obeyed. There's no way to obey anybody giving a command in violation of Allah's obedience or Allah commands. So then obedience is rejected. It's absolutely impossible. Otherwise, it will be someone could construct the impossibility that Allah is commanding us, obey me by disobeying me. That's not possible. That's not possible. So that's number one. Secondly, but also an important thing which have people neglected in looking at the Quran, scrutinizing the Quran, that there is no obedience allowed to anyone who is sinful or a kafir. ولا تطع منهم آثما أو كفورا. So I say this is addressed to the messenger who should not obey the Quraishi, the mushrikeen. But yes, that's the reason for the revelation at the time for this ayah. But the meaning is general. Don't obey anybody who is athim, sinful, or kafir. Any one of them. Who is them?
Really sinful, Sheikh, or is it?
ولا تطع منهم آثما أو كفورا. Don't obey anyone who is sinful or kafir. So anyone who is sinful or kafir does not deserve obedience. He is not eligible to become a commander or a leader. So that's a very important. So a kafir cannot be a leader, a commander cannot give him a commanding position by Shariah injunction. He may be taken by the sword and enforce himself by the sword like Fir'aun, but does not mean that he is a legitimate ruler. The same with anyone sinful. So this is one of the most strongest evidence that the fasiq and the rebellious and the lawbreaker can never be elected to be Khalifa and given bay'ah. And if he commits sin and transgression during his he must be removed from office because he cannot be obeyed according to this ayah. But this is a more detailed study in our books. So these are fundamental points about these things. So the only one who are many people have a misconception that you have to obey your parents. That's a mistake. You have to be kind. وبالوالدين إحسانا. You have to be gentle and charitable to your parents. That does not mean you have to obey them or disobey them. If it is charitable in certain situations to obey, then it is that. In most situations, obeying them is not necessary. Definitely, you must disobey them if or command haram or command kufr or shirk. That's definitely the case. But it does not say some people and some parents, especially in backward societies and village societies, they abuse that by saying you have to obey me, otherwise will be sinful. You will be accounted. You are aq. That's not Huqooq. Huqooq is mistreating and mishandling the parents, not disobeying them. But that's also a fine point we would have to discuss elsewhere. So there's no obedience to anybody except within the limitation and by divine permission. That's a fundamental principle of obedience. That's number one. Number one, it should be clear. That's contradistinction that we find in the books of fiqh and so on. The mutilated fiqh which has started by Muawiyyah usurping power and abolishing shura and essentially cancelling and destroying the Islamic ruling system, essentially.
Is that where you say, Sheikh, is that where you would say this is kind of started from? This behavior of adhering and total obedience?
That's the first start. That's the first start. By him rebelling against the legitimately elected ruler who had the bay'ah of the majority Muslim, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and refusing to come to claiming that Ali has killed Uthman. Okay, even if Ali killed Uthman, then you have come to a court of law, we appoint a judge, and the judge will be judge that issue and interrogate witnesses and so on. And then Ali ibn Abi Talib has to submit to the ruling of this judge, otherwise he will lose his legitimacy as a Khalif. Not by rebelling and excluding himself from bay'ah and pulling the sword in Sham. That's rebellion. That's exiting the community. He's the first one who exited the community by force. So he's a Khariji. He's not only breaking the covenant, because the Messenger of Allah said, Ramadan to Ramadan and Hajj to Hajj, etc., all of these things will commute, erase all sins before that, except for 3. And Abu Hurairah said, hear that for the first time. Before that, we hear that all these will erase all the sins before us, will clean you from all previous sin. Like if you pray a salah, that all the previous sin committed before that will be erased. You coming clean. If you go to Jum'ah, the Jum'ah will erase the sins of the previous week, etc., except from 3. Then they said, the Messenger of Allah said, except for shirk billah, shirk, and naqs al-safqa, and tark al-sunnah. And they said, Abu Hurairah and others asked the Messenger of Allah, and he was present. That's directed from the mouth of the Prophet to his ear. We know what the shirk billah, we don't need explanation. But what is it? Naqs al-safqa, breaking the covenant or breaking the handshake. Say that you give bay'ah to someone, and then you fight him with your sword. That's naqs al-safqa. And the second one, tark al-sunnah. Say, what is tark al-sunnah? That you exit the community, khuruj bin Jama'a, that you exit from the community and regard the community as enemies. You don't belong to them anymore. You fight them with the sword. And both crimes have been committed by Muawiyyah. Someone could say, for just as footnote, Muawiyyah did not give bay'ah to Ali. He did not shake hand. He doesn't need, because the majority of Muslims may give bay'ah, and the moment the majority give a bay'ah, it is binding on all Muslims. Either you give or you don't give. The majority is binding on and the overwhelming majority gave Ali ibn Abi Talib bay'ah. Not only in Medina, people of Iraq, people of Egypt, people of Yemen, and they sent their bay'ah even in written documents undersigned. But we're not going to that history. So that bay'ah is bound on you as if you have committed it. Otherwise, bay'ah will be impossible. If anyone say, I did not shake hands, so bay'ah is not binding for me, meaning there's no bay'ah will be ever achievable or binding, which is impossibility. That's taklif ma la yutaq. That's not possible. So these are the principles of ta'ah. What else we want to address that point? That's just a principle. So there's no obedience to anybody except for the divine permission. That's it.
So Sheikh, where does this, very common narrative we hear constantly from, multiple groups within Islam of this idea of, obeying Muslim rulers, obeying unjust rulers. You've made it pretty clear that,
that's from the shaitan.
Where does it come from?
Because they're forsaking the book of Allah in their back. They put they on 1 or 2 ahadith which are also questionable. But let us go to the hadith. One hadith is that they rely, actually, all what they rely on is the following. The hadith that there will be a ruler, you love them and you love you, and you pray for them and they pray for you, etc. And there will be a ruler, you curse them and they curse you, and you hate him and they hate you. And then the people ask him according to that hadith, which is what a hadith I had, by the way, only one channel of narration. And they they ask him, say, Allah, if situation becomes so bad that we curse him and they curse us, they hate to that level, are we not going to fight them? Should we not fight them with a sword? Say no, as long as they establish prayer between you. Whoever sees something he hates from his ruler, then he should not pull hand from obedience and commit to ta'ah unless they establish salah. Now, what's the meaning of establishing salah? That's clarified by the other hadith and by the ayah before that. لا تطعهم آثما كفورا, meaning does not he, unless he commits a clear sin, public sin, or unless he commits kufr bu'ah, like the hadith of kufr bu'ah. So that's clearly what does it mean. So you may hate this ruler. He's a harsh personality. He has a filthy tongue. he abuses you linguistically. That's very well possible. That could happen. It could have a law very abusive, very nasty, and so on. But as long as he established Salah, it rules by Islam. Not is unjust. No. That's they're playing game with the people's mind by twisting this hadith out of their context. Actually, the hadith about the Ayahs of Quraish is even more better, well established, and the hadith from 4 of the Sahaba. This one only from one Sahabi, Auf ibn Malik. Only one channel or 2 channels of narration. Actually, one channel of narration, then split later up. So it's only the cousin of Auf ibn Malik and someone narrating with him. So it's one channel. One channel of narration is not sufficient to be an authority anyway. Even if you go to a court of law, they're claiming that this sheep belongs to you, the judge will not rely on one channel of narration. And the sheep is in the hand of someone else, will tell you it's in the hand of this guy, he was the owner, until you prove more evidence than one witness. So this is not sufficient really to abrogate or even restrict the ayahs. Or the hadith was narrated by from 4 Sahaba, from Thawban, from Hani bin Abi Talib, from Anas ibn Malik, and from Al-Nu'man ibn Bashir. The hadith says that the imams are from Quraish, as long as the imams will be. That's about the future, is a prophecy. As long as if they rule with justice. And if they are promised, they fulfill their promises. And if they are requested or asked for mercy, they grant mercy. Whoever does not do that, Allah scares and the angels scares and the curse of all people will be upon them. And then the full complete of the hadith, which most people of the hadith were afraid to narrate, and only few books have reported it. The tale of the hadith said, but if they don't comply, then they take your sword and exterminate them. So we have many other narrations clarifying that, but this had been all hidden under the table. And these government scholars and many scholars who Muslim trusted, thinking they are not government scholars, they put only that one hadith of Ibn Malik and the hadith of Kufr on the table. The other hadith are usually swept under the carpet, which are stronger and have better channels of narration.
So speaking on that, Sheikh, what about this concept of ijma, of consensus on this issue? Now, there's
no ijma. There's no ijma.
So Al-Nawawi narrates or comments on one of the hadiths, narrating a consensus on the idea of, as for rebelling against the ruler and fighting him, it's forbidden by consensus of the Muslims, even if it's sinful and oppressive, and that's based in a Sharh of Muslim of 1840. Is this valid?
That's invalid. No, he's a simple-minded man. He's a good man, no doubt about that. Most likely he's not a government scholar, but he's extremely simple-minded. He's Darwish, really. He's a mystic more than really a scholar in the sense. But nevertheless, that they were rebellion against rulers against Yazid, against Muawiyyah, they have been, against Yazid, they have been, and against Abdullah ibn Marwan, it has been, and all of these have been rebellion. And then Al-Hafiz acknowledged that and mentioned all of these rebellions and say, but then ijma' has been concluded after that not to rebel against oppressive rulers because it leads to bloodshed. Clearly, this ijma' is invalid.
Okay. I mean, Imam Tahawi has it in his
they made it part of Aqidah.
Is that even valid to do that in the first place?
No. Putting in the Aqidah is a major blunder. If it is done deliberately, knowing that it's not part of Aqidah, this will be an act of kufr. I don't think Tahawi became a kafir by that. But I think the pressure of the time and all the scholar, they're facing the following dilemma. Either you confront the rulers and you have then bloodshed and problems, and you sacrifice yourself, and they didn't have the courage to do that, or you try to construct a theory to make your cowardice become palatable and acceptable, and that's what they did. Under the cover that's preventing bloodshed and stabilizing the Muslim life. But this is all nonsense.
So you're saying it's being manipulated?
Is twisting the Shariah to their desire.
Okay, yeah.
So that they can have a more convenient life and have no confrontation with the rulers, at least. Many of them have good relation with the rulers and getting the money and getting the income, unfortunately. But this is the Quran has announced that before that. He said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن كثيرا من الأحبار والرهبان لا يأكلون أموال الناس بالباطل ويصدون عن سبيل الله والذين يكنزون الذهب والفضة ولا ينفقون في سبيل الله فبشرهم. All who you believe, many of the scholars, the Ahbar and the monks, the mystics, the ascets, they devour people wealth without any justification. يأكلون أموال الناس بالباطل ويصدون عن سبيل الله, and they divert from the way of Allah. The one who's supposed to be guide to the way of Allah, the scholars, and the Ruhban. Look at a monk. He's devoting himself in a monastery all his life, indulging tasbih and takbir like our Sufi. Durud Sharif 70,000 times. And he's misguiding for the way of Allah. وَيَصُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And the ayah comments, all those who accumulate gold and silver do not spend in the way of Allah, give them the glad tidings of a severe punishment.
SubhanAllah.
But let us focus on the first part of the ayah. So, كثيرا من الأحوال, very of the from the previous nation. Why did Allah tell us? Just to rebuke the previous nation? And this nation is holy and having the other guys have tails like monkeys and they don't have tails like humans? No. They are also human beings like us with the same physiology, with the same desires, with the same falling, with the same diseases. And we will have the same diseases. It's announced by the Prophet. You will follow the ways of the previous people previous you, even if they go the various forms of the hadith from various narrations. Obviously, he was repeating that quite often to warn the people from the ways of the previous people. Even if they go to Al Islam, you go to Israel. And another hadith said, even if one of them did commit fahisha, commit fornication or adultery with his mother publicly, someone of you will do that in the future. So here, and then we said, the Jews and Christians say, who are the people otherwise? And another narration, the Romans and the Persians say, who otherwise? The previous nation, both empires and previous people of religions. And if you will repeat the same mistakes, you will do the same way. So that's why he's saying that. It's just a prophecy that it will happen. No, it's warning to follow that way.
So, Sheikh, are you saying that there were Sahabi who rebelled themselves? So this concept of ijma, if there are narrations of evidence of Sahaba who rebelled, doesn't that really get rid of ijma in the first place? Because then
it's clear. It's clear. It's not an ijma. It's not an ijma. Any ijma who is not containing the ijma, the whole ummah is the Sahaba at their time, and after that Sahaba and Tabi'een. So if there's the ijma of Sahaba, then usually the Tabi'een will have the same ijma. If they don't have, meaning one of the Tabi'een may hear something different from another Sahabi, under the claim that the ijma of Sahaba is a mistake. It has not become. How do you know about ijma of Sahaba? Unless you have a fatwa from all of the mufti of them with the same thing, clear fatwa, you cannot be sure. There's just ijma sukuti. There's ijma from silence. Ijma from silence is even not enough a persuasive ijma. It must be sufficiently well established. And this is only in things which are narrated by over Tawattur. Like, for example, that the Salat al-Dhuhr for the one who is not traveling is 4 rak'ahs. That Fajr is 2 rak'ahs, both in travel and etc. That's the only things there is the real ijma. The rest is just trying to play with the people's feeling and mind the game. Construct ijma who doesn't take. And sometimes they construct ijma about something which the subject of ijma is not clear in their mind, like the usual of Hizb Tahrir about the 3 days and 3 nights. That's not the 3 nights, the matter of ijma. That the position of the head of state should not be empty more than necessary. At that time, Umar judged 3 days and 3 nights for Medina is more than enough. If it is more than that, there might be a need. And maybe it should be even less than that by having a deputy head of state acting as the head of state until the new one is elected, or completing the term of the previous one. That can be designed and be developed by the constitution. Omar shows this procedural way. This procedural way is not hum shari. It's a procedure. There's other procedure to make sure that the position of the head of state is not empty for any length of time, which is not absolutely necessary.
And Shay, what about this? You may have addressed it previously, many times, but so I have a few hadiths here. They're all graded as Sahih, and I obviously can't verify that. I'm taking the classification at face value. In Sahih Muslim, the very famous one of rulers after me will come who do not follow my guidance and sunnah. Some of them will have hearts of devils in human body. And then the
hadith is batil. This hadith is broken. It's not.
Yeah, it says you should listen and obey them, even if the ruler strikes your back and takes your wealth.
Yeah,
you can still listen and obey.
This is a broken. It's not. That's well known. That's well known.
Yeah. Okay.
This one is well known.
Okay,
that's well known. Just if you have the Muslim in front of you, just read the Sunnah and tell you what is that indeed. Do you have Muslim in front of you?
Sorry.
Do you have the Muslim in front of you?
No, I don't at this moment, but I can get it.
That's well known. This is a broken isnad.
No worries.
This narrator mixed 2 ahadith and constructed this from his imagination. This singular nasty text. No, that's not a hadith. Okay. What are the hadith? Mention other hadith also.
Yeah, so there was that one, and then there's the one that you mentioned near the beginning. And then there will be rulers from you who you will see both goodness and corruption. One who recognizes their evil and hates it will maintain his innocence, but one who is pleased with it and follows them will be sinful. The companions asked the Prophet ﷺ, shall we not fight them? And Muhammad ﷺ said, no, as long as they pray.
No, that's the version. This is hadith. Is that Salama? Which hadith is that Salama?
Yes.
The hadith of Salama. Most likely, this is also questionable. This looks like the hadith of Auf ibn Malik because this is Al-Hasan al-Basri narrated from Dabbat ibn Muhsan al-Anazi and Dabbat ibn Muhsan al-Anazi from Salama. It's really extremely strange isnad for the following reason: is that first of all, Al-Hasan al-Basri is mudallis. Is known if he's ana. It may be there's in between a man of questionable quality. He has to do hadith. He has to do tasrih of the hadith. Secondly, Hasan al-Basri is known to trust almost everyone. So he narrates from weak people, trusting them at face value. This is one of his major failing, which has been criticized by his contemporary Muhammad ibn Sirin. And thirdly, it is very strange that if such a hadith goes to Salama. Through a guy who is barely known. He has a couple of ahadith. One of them is quite singular and not very pleasing. I have the study of that in somewhere. So most likely, someone deceived Hasan al-Basri and fed him the hadith, a mutilated form or a smooth form of the hadith of Ibn Malik. But Hasan al-Basri himself narrates that in various narration. One narration from him saying, "La ma sallu," as long as they pray. Another say, "La ma sallu lakum as-salah," as long as they pray for you the 5 prayers. How mean pray for you the 5 prayers? It's a very obscure term. Another narration from Hasan al-Basri himself said, "La ma sallu lakum, la ma aqamu fikum as-salah," as they establish prayer in you. That's similar to Auf ibn Malik. So at best, this is a mutilated form of Auf ibn Hadith or Auf ibn Malik. But this isnad from Hasan al-Basri through Dabba ibn Muhsan al-Anazi to Salama is highly questionable. So we can discount that to say it is a mutilated version or a tempered version of Auf ibn Malik. Auf ibn Malik is much better.
Okay, inshallah. I want to...
So this is, let us say, this most likely, this is almost certainly not from Salama. Most likely is not from Salama.
Okay.
It is Auf ibn Malik, but twisted away either by mistake of Al-Hasan al-Basri or whoever, this Dabba ibn Muhsan al-Anazi, who has only like 7 or 8 hadith. He narrates something from Abu Bakr and Umar, and one of his narration is questionable, is obscure. But you cannot attribute that to him. It may be for someone down the road. So we have to analyze that one. I have it in some documents ready to analyze, but I got this problem with the eyes last year, so I could not continue. I was reviewing the book about obedience to the rulers, going through the hadith once more, grinding them once more, another level of scrutiny, because there are many questions which have arisen in the last 20 years. Because that book about obedience to the rulers is written, its condition and its restrictions is written 20 years ago. But after that, quite a number of research about such a hadith has been done. We need to go and give it another polish. Although the general structure is still good. Okay. So that's this one. So that one, you can say that's a question mark. At least the various narration for Hasan al-Basri with these 3 versions, La masal, as they pray. That's what the Madkhali and Jami and government scholars love to quote, as long as they pray. They pray. But the other one, which you find also in another book of hadith, with as good isnad to al-Hasan as this one, is the one which is, we say, Lama aqam fikum, as they establish prayer in you. Establish prayer in you is then a term which is meaning establish Islam, ruling by Islam. It's not only prayer. For example, they don't collect zakah. Huh? If they are allowed usury banking, that's covered by. So that must be and understood under as long as they establish a salah. Establish a salah meaning establish a deen. That's no doubt about that. Lama aqamu fikum, establish in you a salah. What's meaning establish salah in you?
So just to clarify for the for the listeners and for myself as well.
So this hadith of Dabba ibn Muhsan al-Anazi and Salama most likely is a mutilated version from Auf ibn Malik. So it means only Auf ibn Malik.
Okay. So just again to clarify for listeners and myself, so what you're saying, Sheikh, is that the idea of unconditional obedience is only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the messenger through permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, telling us directly to obey and
guaranteeing that his infallibility.
And guaranteeing his infallibility, but for everyone else it's all conditional as long as they
conditional, yeah. And it has to be specified, by Allah's command. It has to be specified by text. It's not specified by reason. You think it's rational to obey? No, this has nothing to do with rationality. Because the rational condition is that the only sovereign in the universe is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and anybody else is not sovereign, is the opposite of sovereign. And if any kind of a smell of sovereignty should be rejected. Otherwise, you have violated Tawheed. You have first to reject all Taghut. And anyone giving command in his own power or attribute to himself the right of command is Taghut. You have to reject the Taghut and make kufr of Taghut. Reject him. Not only say he's a Taghut, if you have to reject him, he cannot be accepted. Not accepted as a ruler, accepted as a leader, not accepted as a respect-worthy human being. It doesn't mean necessarily you have to fight him unless he pulls the sword. That's something else. But he has to be rejected. You are not acceptable. You just regard him as non-existent and rejected. So this is Tawheed. This is fundamental. This is not a secondary issue. This is an issue related to Tawheed.
Sheikh, I've got a question. So sometimes a lot of scholars, they fall into this trap of somehow feeling that they have to become vanguards of the deen. So for example, if we don't have these rulers, or we have complete disconnect with the authority, would lead to greater fitna. So you have an entire...
It's irrelevant. That's all irrelevant. This is not going to violate Tawheed to avoid fitna if it is true. It is lead to fitna. No, it doesn't lead to fitna. Who said it leads to fitna? That's their imagination. That's their claim. That's their claim. If this really the possibility exists in the universe that you have to obey the ruler even if they are just and violating Shariah to avoid fitna, this could not have been hidden from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you would have made an injunction for that, a clear injunction. Let's show you how the fallacy of this argument.
So this entire sort of area where people start talking about Maslahah.
Besides the fitna, really fitna is the shirk. The word fitna in Quran used if it used in a form that should be rejected and fought against is the shirk. That's the meaning of shirk. The other meaning of fitna is tribulation, testing. Tribulation is happening. You are having tribulation even when you wake in the morning and you have a stomach ache, or you have upset stomach and you need to vomit. That's also a tribulation. That's fitna. You feel disgusted that day. That's a tribulation. And a bigger tribulation when you meet someone in the street who is waving a knife, someone mentally deranged. The authority failed to look him away. That's also a fitna. That's a tribulation. How do you deal with it? And that gets to the level that you have a tyrannical ruler. That's a bigger fitna, a bigger tribulation. It has to be dealt with. And there are ways and means to deal with that, not by obeying him.
Say, Sheikh, would you say the type of scholars that we have today is a big reason as to why the average person is so
exactly this kind of scholarship, this Theresian scholarship is the one which brought the Ummah down the road, this way of decline. Because the majority of scholars after the time of Sahaba and the prime tabi'een, medium tabi'een, and elder tabi'een, after that the energy to rebel and fight has reduced considerably. Only for few people, and there were never a majority of scholars who took the position they should have been taken and did their duty as they should. If they have done their duty and stood their man, the history would have changed, but unfortunately they did not do. And then to add insult to injury, they develop a theory to cover up for their crimes or their cowardice, at least, to say the least. Some of this because of cowardice, but maybe few of them are so mentally not really focused properly and misunderstood things like that. But this does not mean that they are right. But I think the majority of those who have in history been against rebellion and all these things are really to appease rulers or just to save their own skin.
To develop on what Rash was saying, what about scholars we have today, like, for example, Abdullah bin Bayyah, who sides or has a kind of a working relationship with like the UAE leaders today, right? Who says for the greater good that of the ummah imploding, as a
you will get all of these kinds of arguments. You get all of these arguments. Everyone has if he sincerely believes that, then he has to justify it Yawm al-Qiyamah. But he's not according to Sharia, he's not allowed to that.
Okay.
Definitely, he cannot. But we have to clarify. If cooperation is, if he said they are, if he said they are legitimate rulers, if he said they are shit, but they're better than the American shit, maybe yeah, that's something else. But if they say no, we have to cooperate and obey and so on, so no, we have to cooperate, yes, but not to obey.
So
how to do that? It has to be constructed some way. Like for example, you have authority in some place, and then you are a ruler in a certain country. Say, okay, the ruler of that country doesn't rule with that last deal, but the majority are Muslims, and it's better to cooperate with that country to the benefit of Muslim, for example, in the industrial and technical development. That's okay, because Muslims are ordered to cooperate in every way possible. But there's not mean that it's legitimate to obey them, and the people are not having the right to topple them and get better rulers. And deny the people the right of accounting them and questioning them, why is this like this? Why is that not like that? Although this is really a tightrope. I don't think you need really to have really someone, a circus specialist who can go tightropes to do that. I don't think Bin Bayyah is that. But these people use these arguments since ancient time to justify their approaching governments instead of taking the opposition position and criticize and force them to correct their ways. That's a better way of serving the Ummah than cooperating with those and letting them go with their sometimes kufr and nifaq, the alliance with the kuffar. But everyone has to answer for that Yawm al-Qiyamah.
And Sheikh, what should our perspective be of scholars who have openly either sided or defended regimes? You have maybe like Al-Buti or Bin Baz, like obviously from different sides of the spectrum, but who openly defended their country's regimes. And
they go back again to Tahawi and justify that, and everyone referred to the previous scholars and claim that's the consensus, and they try to justify themselves.
Should we take from those scholars? Is it still valid to
No, they are not trustworthy. They are not trustworthy. Neither in their mental structure nor history shows that they are not trustworthy. They never benefited Islam. Let me give various examples in major historic junction. Like for example, when the printing press was invented in Europe, it was actually invented in Samarkand before that. They leave that when it became clear in Europe. The scholarly community at the time decided most likely to keep the control and power of the Muslim masses. They decided to declare that this is bid'ah, etc., and there's an injunction to prohibit using these printing presses for 3 centuries, including sometimes even the penalty of death, putting the Ummah 300 years back. While Europe in 300 years developed science, technology, millions of people started reading books, and that weakened also the control of the Sheikhs. Obviously, that's what undermined the Sheikhs in Europe. The people started reading by themselves. You don't need to go to a priest to read for you. You read by yourself. You use your mind. You use your brain. They prevented Muslims from doing that.
Yeah.
Only much later, 300 years later, it was permitted in Egypt, most likely by the barakah of Napoleon bringing a printing press with him and starting really the printing press age in the Muslim world. 3 centuries later, in Europe, it started 15-something by Gutenberg. In an industrial level, maybe it has started in Samarkand before there's an idea and there's a model, but really something which would have a societal and historic effect is by Gutenberg, 1415 or something like that, and then 15 something, and then until 1790 and 1800. That's 300 full years. We have missed all of this development.
Sheikh, do you think a big part of the problem is that we've just honestly become a bit too taqlidi, in the sense that we're not willing to actually explore the evidences and explore the information ourselves?
And this scholar enforced that, say you have to be madhabi, you have to be. And the one who are rebelling against madhab, actually they are not rebelling against madhab. They're calling the people for their own madhab, which is because they are not going. They are not going to really to Quran and Sunnah properly. They are going to essentially to Ahmad bin Hanbal, like for example, the Wahhabi claim that they are claiming we are not Muqalideen and so on, etc. Believe taqlid, but in reality they are following Ibn Taymiyyah. And they take Ibn Taymiyyah as an authority and his explanation and so on, essentially. And then before that, Ahmad bin Hanbal, and for that, some hadith scholars. That's their reference. Did you see any of them building any structured argument based on Quran properly? No. Although they have, if they bring, look at their discussion, or they bring one hadith here, Salama, hadith here, hadith there. Where is about the ayahs of the Quran, what they imply? What do they mean? What the full implication of the ayah, the expansion of it? Did anyone sit there and say that you can deduce from that the necessity of having a constitution or a Supreme Court? I have discussed that in our book of Obedience to Allah about adoption, the theory of adoption, and how to settle the issues of adoption and the problematic related to that in a well-expanded way. There's a chapter called Shariah al-Tabanni, the problematic of adopting laws. Because the Islamic State or the Islamic community has to adopt laws sometimes. There's no escape, because there are various issues where people differ in point of views. And sometimes there is a necessity to unify the people in one, at least for some time, at least in one point of view, because running the affairs can't be done without that adoption, for example.
Yeah.
Question then, how to adopt, and what's the limitation of adoption, and how to challenge the adoption, and how to vote about it, and how to challenge it, possibly accusing the adoption to be violating Sharia, essentially, and hence it is a Sharia issue, not only an issue of majority, and so on, and how to appeal to a constitutional court, and the necessity of a constitutional court, and how to dispute with the rulers, and how to remove them peacefully without that all necessary existence of a Sharia court. All of these things, you don't find anybody developing an idea about that through Islamic custom, because they just obey, even if he beats you up. Even if you go to Hadith Auf ibn Malik, there are, after the three first generation, Auf Malik and his cousin, the one that him, then it branches two branches. One branch say, if you see from your something you hate or you don't like, then don't pull your hand from obedience, as long as they establish Salah. And the other version from another narrator, the two, it's split by two men. Yeah, it's the Auf ibn Malik and the narrator from him, and these three are the same one, and then there are two narrators split like that. One says, if you see from your ruler something you dislike, then don't rebel as long as they establish Salah. Okay. That sounds reasonable, but you didn't dislike. Another one say, if you see something from you which is from disobedience to Allah. So there's different way. It's fundamentally different. That one could possibly come from the Prophet, because you may dislike from the ruler many things which are not necessarily disobedience to Allah. For example, heavy taxes. You say, we need taxes. Nobody likes taxes, but they're not disobedience to Allah. You see my point? He maybe say, okay, the penal code is having is too mild in punishment for certain crimes, for example, which Sharia did not specify number of lashes and things like that, and he decided that he should add, for example, things which, like for example, for falsifying documents, etc. Besides publicizing the name and scandalizing him publicly and making him ineligible for public offices and things like that. But maybe he said that's not enough. He should go 5 years in prison. Another rulers may come say, no, 5 years is not enough. You go 25 years of jail. Nobody likes that. But that's not distributed for Allah, because there's a possible adoption. It can be justified on ground of Sharia. But that's not a reason for rebellion. The other one say, if you see what you don't like from disobedience of Allah, that's clearly this addition of obedience of Allah is done by this one narrator here, and this man is cheating, because it cannot be the messenger of Allah say you see something you dislike from disobedience of Allah. It can't be coming from a messenger. He will never order you to accept anything in disobedience of Allah. There's no way it can come from a messenger. So that's from this man's imagination or fabrication.
I want to...
or possibly lapse of memory. So you have to study the two channels and see where does the disease come from.
What about Asuli points, Sheikh? Like Rash mentioned, the concept of Maslahah and using these as justifications. Are these valid at all, or where do they come from? Like
the Maslahah is only used when you're discussing Mubahaat and choose from Mubahaat. Then go by Maslahah. What's more beneficial for this situation may be different than other situation, but has nothing to do with declaring something to be haram or halal. All halal. So with the basic rule of permissibility, everything is halal. Everything has its own Maslahah to various level. In the statecraft of the Islamic head of state, the Islamic authority will choose from the masalih, from the mubahat, the things which are more efficient and easy to implement, and which bring the best benefit at that specific time. Maybe a century later, or maybe even a generation later, the situation of economy and situation of wealth, development of technology has changed, and maslahah will be elsewhere. Then you adopt it. It's just adopting it mubahat. Has nothing to do with haram and halal. Maslahah and mafsada has nothing to do. Mafsada, every haram is having mafsada, and there is no permission to do haram unless you have a necessity or permission of Shariah. And the necessities and exception are well known. Rukhsa, you have the rukhsa. The same with mubah, you are allowed to do mubah at liberty, but do the mubahs as a ruler, which are most beneficial for the community, the easiest to implement, and the least demanding and harsh to the community.
So
that's where maslahah and mafsada comes. It is not a source of law. It's a source of regulation, administrative procedure, things like that, in the sense that you use those who fulfill the purpose at best, but only for the mubah. So meaning, we are not discussing is it halal or haram. Halal haram is established by the text. Finish, game over. The problem with these people is that they don't comprehend the basic ruling of permissibility, and they say, how we can get this, how we can do that. There's no hadith saying you are allowed to do that. You don't need hadith to do allowed to do that. That is, Allah is silent about that, meaning it's permissible. So that all this argument of maslahah and mafsada, if it has any merit, is an attempt to overcome their mistake by not recognizing the basic ruling of permissibility.
Rash, did you have a question?
Yeah, so because, obviously we're in a time where there's an overwhelming point of view in terms of dealing with the reality as it stands. So, for example, you have all these rulers in place, and I've already mentioned about greater fitna and all that kind of stuff, but in terms of, is there any arguments around, is there any arguments or any justification around closing doors in terms of, there's a problem here, and if the ummah was to rebel, it's going to lead to greater fitna. If the ummah was to...
That's the claim. That's it. How do you know that it leads to greater fitna?
So, Sheikh, the criteria for rebellion is only...
History has proven you wrong. For example, when the ummah rebelled against Bani Umayyah, the replacement Bani al-Abbas are much better than Bani Umayyah, and less bloody and less oppressive.
Well, looking at current events, for example, so, I mean, they'll always use current events to
because the rebellion was not managed properly, because you made mistakes in the rebellion.
So for
Allah
example,
did not allow you to make a rebellion like an idiot. You should do things the proper way. They did not do it the proper way.
So when you say proper way,
and they violated Shariah in certain aspects in their rebellion.
So say, for example, Syria right now, you have a tyrant, and it's gone completely, it's become quite a mess now. A lot of Madkhalis turn around and say, look, see, that's proven our point. It's led to greater fitna.
No, it doesn't prove anything. Who said that rebellion is done properly?
That's what I would say as well. Isn't that too simplistic? There's so many there's so many other factors, political factors, other countries involved with those things. It's not a simple case of those people just rebelled, right? I think that's just a Madkhali way of just making it too simple.
No, I tell you what, because the people, they're starting with demonstration and so on, and the regime starts cracking down, and the people starting restoring to women. They do not organize themselves. They don't have a proper leadership, and they didn't understand what they target. They were targeting, for example, certain factions came forward and say that they are targeting this regime because they are Nusayri, and they are not because they are not ruling by Islam. You are barking the wrong tree. Another one come because they are violating human rights in this respect, but not this one respect. But it's not necessarily that what the reason should be. The reason should be they are not ruling by Islam, and they are oppressive and just. The target should be clear, and the replacement should be clear. There was no clear replacement. And they were scattered in various groups. And the activist groups betrayed them. Muslim Brotherhood let them down, and Hizb ut-Tahrir was just watching and not knowing what to do.
The thing is doesn't that further the point that at this moment, with being so much in the dark, so little.
In that case, rebellion. If you know what you are doing, and you have the necessary power, and you organize yourself at that ground properly. That's it. There's not to say rebellion against rebel. Is it permissible? Yes, it's permissible. But how to do this permissibility?
So we should differentiate between two issues. One is the ruler is not valid, and person to establish their validity, the onus is on them to override these clear ahkam. That's the first thing. Second thing,
ruler is in there. He ought not to be there. He must be removed. Now, how to remove it? What is the mechanism? What way to do it? That has to be studied. You have to have the knowledge. You have to do the homework. To have the divine permission to rebel. Someone could decide, I will go with my machine gun, go to the palace and shoot him dead and sacrifice myself. That's fine. He can do that if he wants. Does it change anything? Maybe it doesn't change anything, but he decided to sacrifice himself. That's fine. But he will not bring people on board and then let them down. Like, for example, Muslim Brotherhood, they do the people in Hama in 1983, was it 82 or 83? They invited the people on board and then they let them down. Or the people in Hama moved. The arrangement was that they will move also in Damascus. But the guy in Damascus, they chickened out and they did not move. And
so it starts intellectually, Sheikh. Then it starts intellectually. Then it starts with having the correct.
That's the details to be discussed then between the activists and so on. What can be done and so on. That's the job of the organizations and Islamic parties and so on. What to do and how to do it properly. And there will be also human failings there, and they will be accountable for that. If it is done because of negligence of doing their homework, they will be accountable. Or if they went deliberately, then they will be accountable even worse. And sometimes this is the situation of the time does not let, for example, the movement against Bani Umayyah and the underground movement was to choose the most acceptable from the house of the Prophet. This is a wrong slogan. It should be to move for the Shura. Unfortunately, that slogan is wrong. Nevertheless, that slogan was sufficient to topple Bani Umayyah and get rid of them. And that is to do a major correction to Islamic history, at least.
Sheikh, I wanted to go back to the Muawiyyah point for a second. And I wanted to ask a question. How has, which you've clearly identified that what he did was incorrect and the way he took power and it's not valid and that he made a major blunder and mistake by doing that. How is this like been allowed to continue and justified all 1,000+ years later now? How is
because people accepted. There was a faction who accepted that. There was a faction against him, and this faction split also between people who were critical to Muawiyyah and on the right ground there was a minority of the Sahaba and then other people, because of the oppression of Muawiyah's side and the mass extermination, killing the people in Basra and so on, and later in Kufa, they went to extreme points, and they were done in the Imam should be in Al-Bayt and appointed by a divine injunction, etc., etc. They went off tangent, and then as a result, and also that's part of the work of Muawiyyah and his people. They diverted their hatred and their opposition toward the early Sahaba, Abu Bakr and Umar and so on, and they were busy with that. And Muawiyyah was let alone. To add insult to injury, because the mistake of Hassan to surrender the Khilafah to Muawiyyah and make Sulh, that's even blocked many of Shia from criticizing Muawiyyah, because if we criticize that, then Hassan must have made a major blunder, and they cannot swallow that. So it is because nobody did the work going to taking Quran as a leader and Sunnah as a leader, Sunnah mutawatira. And really, is the real ijma of Sahaba of the time of Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali as a base. Everyone went in an imaginary world. And also Muawiyyah was doing his mischief. He was fabricating a hadith, he was inventing stories, he was allying secretly with the Romans, paying them jizya to fight Ali ibn Abi Talib. All of that was done. It's a major conspiracy of historic proportion. It's not easy. It's a huge fitna. But that's the details. We don't want to go in it. It can't happen. And it went. And the majority of scholars did not have the stamina. Yes, after that, there was the rebellion of Harra, and that was lost. Hussein did not manage the affair properly by going to Al-Kufa against the advice of Bin Abbas, telling him this is not a reliable place. The people aren't reliable. You cannot rely upon them. And it led to his martyrdom. And then the matter was scattered. And the people split in various factions. And some went into imaginary world of waiting for a Mahdi or waiting for a call from heaven and all of these imaginary things. That can happen. That happened in early Christianity.
Wow.
When someone dying on the cross, who is not Isa, but they took him for Isa, they could not stomach that. So that's a possible martyrdom. They could not stomach that. So they must construct a theory about sacrificial goat and the lamb who was sacrificed at the foundation of the world, and then all the story, and add that to the mythical and legendary reports in the Old Testament and so on, and developing that what you see, divinity of Christ and the later Trinity. Can happen. And one single person like Mo could start certain a direction and build around it, and it can take the upper hand after some time. because the other side, but there maybe they have an excuse because the available literature, available scripture are not protected. In our case, the excuse is minimal because the scripture is protected. The Quran has been just forsaken. People did not go back to the Quran for these things. They just close their eyes. They recite it just as a song in the for Ramadan and things like that. Essentially,
it's true. I mean, ultimately, the discussion is no longer about text. It's always about this scholar. It's that if you look at some, even some of the Islamist camp, when they discuss, they always refer to this scholar says this scholar says this. It never goes back to the fundamentals, and it comes down. It's almost like there's an inability. They don't have the confidence to do it.
Exactly. They have been exactly like happened with Eddie Christian. This one said this one. Just go to the scripture, read the scripture. No. We're not qualified. And our scholars, they are the one who interpret the scripture for us, give us the direction. Just casual reading. People who used to be casually read the scripture. Like for example, I saw a video of a converted Australian lady, and she said she never thought that Muslims believe in Isa and respect him and so on. And she was in a state of shock. And then asking the priest, why you say the Muslims are enemies of Christians? And I said, no, they don't believe in the divinity. I said, is Isa divine? And when I read the Gospels, he's a human being. He's a prophet. Who make him divine? That woman is just grown up naturally, just reading the scripture by her own self. An example, a live example in front of us in modern time. But because she built her faith on reading the scripture in the available in her hand. And she never thought about Isa greater than her prophet.
This is another thing. This is an interesting one. So
the same happened here. But there will be an excuse because that scripture was not protected. And there was a man who was obsessed with certain ideas of the sacrificial son and most likely coming from Mithraism and other pagan philosophies. Not mischievously, but possibly he believes in these things, in this rubbish, and then he invented this divine nature and the one who is sacrificed to save the world from the devil, things like that. That was the original theory. Later on, to atone for the original sin and so on, that's the only theory which could work. Because the initial theory of Paul cannot work; it's impossible. It will lead to absolute dualism, and that developed earlier by Marcion or Marcion. Marcion, his theory was that Isa is the son who came to penetrate the world, and the world was under control of the devil, including the Old Testament is the revelation of the devil. Musa is the prophet of the devil. He's not a prophet of God. That was too much. It was too much of development of the ideas of Paul. So that he was declared heretic and the people shunned him. That was extreme. But this is the natural conclusion and development of the Pauline point of view. So they have to do another development. So we want to understand that the Son of God, the adoptive, initially it was the adopted son, has to die such a miserable death. And the possibility that someone else took his figure and so on was essentially discounted by Paul. But it was a widespread idea in early times. So then must be for something big. In Judaism, there's always a sacrifice for a sin, sacrificial lamb. He's a sacrificial lamb. That's how things develop.
Chef, the thing is this, something like that's very huge and very obvious that you can see, like in terms of, a clear
for you it's obvious because you go to the Quran. They refuse stubbornly to go to the Quran and invoke it.
I'm talking about for us. So there's almost like a perception that's been built that, okay, if we have people going to the text, because, so you've got, on the one hand, you've got the classic, you've got the Madkhalis, and then on the other side, you've got the classical Sufi types. And they start to build an entire narrative. You're not equipped to go back to the text. How do you know about Sarf and all these fancy, all these various.
You don't need much equipment to go to the text. That's not as deep as people think. That's where they persuaded themselves because they want to be lazy. And they want to having favor by rulers. Most of them are working with rulers and get favors from rulers. That's it. Let's face it. And most of the so-called scholars are munafiq. And we have two hadiths, one from Uqbah ibn Amr al-Juhani and one from Abdullah ibn Abd ibn al-As. And we said the most munafiqun in my ummah are the scholars. أكثر منافق أمتي قراؤها. The scholars of my ummah, the most frequent munafiq are in the Qurra. The highest percentage of nifaq is in the Qurra.
Qurra being, so you got alim and you got Qurra. What's the distinction between the two?
Qurra is a scholar. Alim is the knowledgeable, the one who knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's something else. These are the who inherited the scripture. Al-ulama also, and they confuse the people by playing that game. In the first century, nobody dared calling himself alim except maybe Abdullah ibn al-Abbas. All others, they call themselves Qurra. And the rebellion of Jamajim is called the rebellion of the Qurra, of the scholars. Nobody dared call himself alim. Later, in the 2nd century, they attribute themselves alim. They started giving themselves the title alim to mislead the people, and then they invoked the hadith. The prophets did not leave the dirham or dinar, they left knowledge and ilm, and whoever got that knowledge, he got a very good inheritance. Yeah, these are this. But what are the alim? Al-alim, إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء, those who have fear of Allah subhanahu, those who respect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they have real knowledge.
So what's the distinction between them? Qurra being somebody who recites?
No, as scholars, reader like an English reader in physics.
So what's their qualification in terms of, do they go back to the text, or are they is there a common denominator?
إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء, those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ulama, those who inherit from the Prophet. What would they inherit from the Prophet? What did you inherit? Quran and Sunnah. So we'll go back to that, understand it. Not like Al-Nawawi when he says Ijma'. Ijma' what? The deen is complete by the death of Muhammad. It can't be Ijma' against the deen.
So Sheikh, what would you say is the minimum criteria, if there is one, to be able to go to the text and start, re-looking at things?
Just go to the text and you will by yourself, you will get there. Just start going there. Just start.
There is a balance. For example, if I want
by reading it, start by tadabburing it. The minimum will have basic Arabic language at least.
The thing is,
even translations are good. They will give you the first step, but really to have these issues.
What about the very common analogy, right? If like Rash was saying, from both camps, whether it's Madkhali, whether it's traditionalist, Sufi, whatever it is, right? If the very common analogy they will give is, I can read 10 books, 50 books on medicine. That doesn't qualify me to be a doctor. I'm going to perform surgery on someone. Same way, if I read the translations of the Hadith,
no, it makes you a doctor.
Why does that make me qualified to give a...
If you read it properly and that you can become a doctor, yeah. If you read it and absorb it properly. But there are certain things which are practical, like stitching, like something like that for surgery. You have to do it with the supervision, someone who did it before you. That's it. Not but abstract knowledge about Quran and Sunnah and these issues, you don't need. There's nobody need to hold hand with you. But just a linguistic ability, understanding that.
But
respect this the revelation of Allah and say this is the truth is there. Is not elsewhere. It's not what the Mas'ari said. Is that what the ayah said?
The thing is, you can easily read a translation, or you can read something and you have a...
No. Let's go to the Arabic. It's the ayah. لا تطع منهم آثما أو كفورا. Don't obey anyone who is sinful or kafir. Addressing the messenger. You are not allowed to obey any sinful of that. Why don't apply that to the rulers? And then say, oh no, there's an exception for the ruler. Where's the exception? Bring me the exception and show that there's an exception. But nobody reads that ever.
Okay, so basically the onus of the person who's reading is to ask the question. So for example, somebody you like, for example, say you got hadith.
There will be no question rush. Start reading and you will see by yourself.
I think there needs to be some kind of balance. So for example, someone can pick up a hadith and completely misconstrue it. Completely,
Read the hadith, but for these issues, we don't need a hadith. Just go to the Quran. It's enough.
Okay.
I mean, there are certain intricate issues which you would, like...
No, they didn't. They didn't read, for example, when the Quran talks about those who have a covenant broke it with the Prophet said, about these, the covenant breaker in opening of Bara'ah. Yeah? That's the opening of Bara'ah. Jameel. Opening word, then he says that, فَإِنَّكَثُوا أَيْمَانَهُمْ, if they break their covenants and attack your religion, then fight the leader of the قاتل أئمة الكفر إنهم لا أيمان لهم لعلهم ينتهون. This applies to those who will break the covenant, they did conclude the Prophet. But that's a general. Anyone who breaks his covenant and attack your religion, he is a leader of kufr. قاتل أئمة الكفر. Why they become أئمة الكفر? Because of these conditions. What makes them أئمة الكفر? Only those were in Mecca violating the covenant with the Prophet at that time, and anyone Yawm al-Qiyamah similar is not an Immat al-Kufr. No, this is a description. There's clear description. Someone who breaks his covenant and attack you, attack you the religion. These two conditions make the one doing that a leader of Kufr. and he's worthy of fight. فقاتلوا أئمة الكفر. Because with that action, they have proven that they have no iman, they have no covenant. Their covenant has always been broken. They have to be fought.
But Sheikh,
Of course, by the sword. And so that's applied to anyone jumping in power and messing up your religion.
But Sheikh, doesn't that just make everyone some sort of a mujtahid? Like if everyone and anyone is
no, these things are so clear. There's major things. Not a mujtahid or no mujtahid. Just read Kitab Allah and say it. If it had been Hadith, I would not have told Hudayfa when he asked him about what to do about the fitan. I say, read the book of Allah and apply it. If it is not applicable when you read it, oh yeah, Hudayfa is an Arab, obviously, he's Fasih. He doesn't need Arabic. You have to read the same level of Arabic understanding. But most of the book of Allah, 99% are not controversial. Straightforward. Just read it and respect it and accept it. They didn't do that. Ask the Madkhali about this ayah. And the ayah, لا تطعن آثما أو كفورا. Specifically, the ayah shows clearly what it means. It's not only for the Quraishi, because those in Quraysh, most of them are kafir anyway. They're not athim. Why say لا تطع منهم آثما أو كفورا? Do not owe any one of them either an athim or a kafur. Or meaning there will be a situation where some people will be athim, but not necessarily kafur. They cannot be obeyed also. There may be parents, they cannot be obeyed also. There may be rulers, they cannot be obeyed unless you bring an evidence and a clear evidence that restricts that. But there's no evidence to restrict that. All that what there is either these mutilated ahadith or these fabricated ahadith. Or these questionable narration, which have been, the word has been twisted or a word added, like the hadith I mentioned of Auf ibn Malik. Split, I said. The Sahabi Auf Malik, a man read to him, and then it splits. One says, when you see something you hate or dislike from your ruler, don't pull your hand from it. Don't leave the obedience and start fighting. As long as they establish the deen or establish prayer. Let's use the wording. The other one say, unless you see something you hate from disobedience to Allah. Where the word disobedience to Allah has come? You don't need to be a scholar. Just ask yourself. Don't swipe it under the carpet. That's all that I'm asking.
So Sheikh, you know this these concepts of, like not being able to speak on something unless you have an ijazah and stuff. Is this all?
So that's BS. That's all BS. That's nothing. Ijazah what? Why should you have ijazah? The book of Allah itself is ijazah. He's addressing al-munafiqeen who have no ijazah. أفلا تدبروا القرآن وكلام عند غير الله لوجد فيه اختلافا كثيرا. Do they ponder and analyze the Quran? If it had been for somebody else, Allah except Allah, you will find the contradictions. Go and find contradiction. That's addressing munafiqeen. You need ijazah for that. All what you need is just basic human mind and basic linguistic ability. By the way, the basic linguistic ability of the Quran is much less than even the Sadiq Hadith, because 99% of the words of the Quran are basic words, essentially. You just need to be having a brain slightly above the monkey to understand it. 500 to 1,000 words. Yes, there are other rules mentioned maybe once or twice in the Quran, like BATIL, we discussed that in Surah Al-An'am, Basala, a few words like that which come once or twice, but the rest, like dhikr, is repeated in many places. It has 6, 7 meanings, like qala, said, like ja'ala, made, things like that. That's all the Quran consists out of these basic words, very basic words. Even good and evil, only the word used, tayyib, khabith, evil. Although in Arabic there are various variations, khabith, khasis, low class, all of these are just used khabith. Evil. The Quran uses just evil. Just give it just the core concept of good and evil.
Okay.
Doesn't use mean, doesn't use other words which are similar to khabith in certain applications. Use always where it is khabith. Even, for example, if you are giving charity, you're giving, for example, a harvest like a palm tree which has not been fertilized properly. Some of the dates will be small and we call busr. They don't develop color, and they don't taste that sweet. The Quran called them khabith. They are not up to the level of goodness, so they are khabith. Doesn't use another word. This type of thing you should not take to give for charity. You should give from tayyib. Don't go to the khabith. Go to the reasonable middle one. Very few words.
the Khawarij, for example, they derived from Quran major sin as being kufr, and they fought with the sword based on.
No, that's not what, because they don't read the Quran. They don't derive from the Quran. Because if they have written so tadabbur al-Quran, it would not happen. You have to do tadabbur. The Quran does not mean you read one ayah. That's making the Quran adeen. You're tearing it apart, striking ayah against another ayah. It's very clear. The derivation is faulty.
So that it's manifestly you can determine, just even with cursory knowledge, you can determine their faults.
Yeah, naturally, just go do it by yourself and you will see. But all of it, from A to Z, from Bismillah ar-Rahman al-Ba and the Bismillah ar-Rahman Surah al-Fatiha, beginning of the Quran, to the scene at the end of the Nas.
Your layman won't necessarily be able to carry out that kind of.
No need for the lay. We do it for them.
Okay.
The scholar should have done that for them. The Ramki Madkhali should have done that for the community, instead of referring to Bin Baz and Madkhali and so on. They chose for them to be donkeys. Tell them you have disgraced yourself down to a donkey level. That's it.
Basically, so what you're saying is you have people at that level have the sufficient tools to go back and question the text. Sorry, query on the text directly.
Go to the Quran, like the hadith of the hadith when Hudayfa, when he asked about the fitan. So don't ask, don't waste your time asking about fitna. It will be a fitna after that, fitna after that, after that. Fitna will continue until يوم القيامة. Read the book of Allah, تعلم له, learn the book of Allah, واعمل بما فيه, and apply to it. Then you will be safe from the fitna. But do it.
So from an end user or a person, should we be amplifying the idea that go back to the text? Any person comes to us,
especially to the Quran as a whole, from A to Z.
So anyone who says the scholars said this, the scholars do it wrong, they derive this from benefit, maslahah, we just reject that. We just got to.
Yes, reject it. I don't know about your scholars. We have an imam. It's called Quran. We have to take that imam. Tell me the imam. You are unable to read the imam. Go to who I can read it. They write book of tafsir. Go and read the various books of tafsir. But this is a lame excuse, because even the book of tafsir, actually the explanatory notes of the mufassir are sometimes more clumsy or more difficult than the ayah itself.
I mean, especially when you're mixing in Israeliyat, some of it is just.
That's also that you have to be worried about that, but it's okay. Read them with a critical eye. All is asked, is that what the scholars claim it is in the ayah? Is it in the ayah? Is it in the rest of the ayah? The ayah لا تطع, for example, take the example, لا تطعنهم آثما أو كفورا. Do not obey any one of them who is either sinful, آثم, or kafur. A time when the Prophet was addressed that, there was no آثم in Quraish. And his companion, definitely nobody was sinful at that time. They were on the highest level of piety and so on. So there will be no Athim there. So he is mentioning Athim there. He's mentioning that because that's for the long haul until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And minhum from them, minhum only from the Quraishi. Why is it from the Quraishi? Why not from all humanity until Yawm al-Qiyamah? And the address is to the messenger, the address to anyone who following until Yawm al-Qiyamah. If the messenger is told not to obey any atham, then everyone else is ordered not to obey any atham or kafir. Ask him this question. Now you claim the rule have an exception, bring me the exception. And then we discuss the hadith that we have shown.
Sheikh,
and if you bring with these three hadiths, is that the only one there? What's about the hadith of Thawban, which related by 4? We have a bahth, a research for that separately. The order to fight or unjust rule and exterminate them with the sword. We have it. I don't know. Is it translated? I'm not sure. Anyway, it's available. It's a separate bahth by itself. With a very long appendix, huge appendix about the narrators and all the issues they try to rally all their life against it. Some of these scholars there's a question mark about these people if they are really sincere. They are not munafiq, wal-'iyadhu billah.
Sheikh, a lot of this is addressed in your Kitab Tawheed Volume 1, isn't it? The dhikr being protected and the concept of Ayahs and all these things, isn't it? So I think for listeners as well and readers, that's a really great place to start. It addresses probably a lot of the questions that people may have.
Yeah. You will have to.
Do you have any other questions, Rash?
But certainly, if the madkhal is come with this, something say you just shut up and go back to study. Go to the Imam, the Quran, and follow it.
Only more. I haven't really got any questions, but in terms of right now, so for example, if you look at some of these lands, there is a record. If you imagine, as an ummah, we're in a very difficult situation. There's knowledge is minimal. People tend to, so for example, have institutions in the Middle East, and they kind of have to tread a very fine line to facilitate knowledge, but at the same time avoiding certain issues. What's the stance on those? Or, for example, you have people who hedge in. So, for example, you have Booty. Booty used to word things very cautiously to not directly endorse, or maybe he did, but in the event that somebody kind of has to hedge and not directly endorse. But
my question: why we are discussing Booty? That's my question. Are we going to sit on accounting of Al-Qiyamah? No. Are we going to take him as a leader? Is that what people say? We're following Booty. You are not. Booty is not your Imam. The Quran is your Imam. Booty made a mistake in this statement. He has an excuse. Maybe he's hedging. He's afraid of the sword. Maybe he has an excuse. But that's not our issue. Our issue is that his statement, is it a correct one?
So if a scholar lives in the Middle East and he is not able, he has to do something. He has to impart knowledge somehow. What is his remit?
So what? Why?
How much benefit of the doubt do we give them, Sheikh?
Not just benefit of that.
But why should I give any benefit of the doubt? Why should I shouldn't do? I think this the question is the issue is presented wrongly. They may be sincere, they may be doing their best, but they are hedging. Hedging, evidence for hedging is this, and this statement is wrong. What interests me is that the statement is wrong. I am here maybe in having a margin of freedom. I can express it without fear. I am lucky one. Maybe I am coward. I run away from there and they are stuck there. Yeah, fine, maybe. But the question, is that statement correct or not? That's the question. How you deal with it, that you have to deal with it according to your conditions, which you have to answer Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's it. That's the way to deal with it. Don't take the issue is that do you ascribe these pious people that they are traitor and so on. They may be not. Maybe they are more pious than you, 100 times more. But that's not relevant. Doesn't mean that the statement is correct.
We have to look at what the text says.
That's exactly like Musa when some people of Bani Israel asked him who is the most knowledgeable. He said, I am the most knowledgeable. And Allah chided him, say, why didn't say Allah is most knowledgeable? And then I am. By the way, there's someone who is more knowledgeable than you. And Musa insisted to go and take lesson from the guy, and he could not even endure the hardship. After 3 times, he failed to understand the man. He gave up. And Musa is the most pampered between the prophets of the messenger for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's really the pampered child of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we allow it to use such a language. He's really pampered. Many narrations show that he's exceptionally pampered. He's allowed so many things to know what he's allowed. And still, that's the fact. That's the factual reality. We have to learn. Was he excused? Maybe he thought he's the most intelligent. Definitely he did not mischief. Definitely he knows that Allah is more knowledgeable than himself. Definitely. But it doesn't come in his mind. So Allah shaded him. The correct way of expression is there. Allah is the most knowledgeable. And I think I am, at least in this environment, I am the most knowledgeable of you. You shouldn't have say on whole earth, maybe someone far behind the horizon is more knowledgeable.
Sheikh, would you say it's like are you saying like your perspective is that the idea of whether a scholar is comfortable with a ruler or who hangs around with the ruler or endorses it?
I myself tend tend generally to have negative thought about most of these, unless I have direct experience. Like Ibn Baz seems to have a portion of sincerity, but obviously he's limited in his scope and his understanding. So many of his positions are because of his limitations. Limitation because he's ultimately coming from a school of the Wahhabis, and his knowledge about Quran and really background in usul and things like that is deficient.
So that's why we can't rely on them. We have to go back to the text.
Exactly. Boti most likely that is having maybe a little bit usul, but his taqlid. He studied in the classics and these classics are Amidi, etc., etc., and all of these are stuck with that, with the rubbish which accumulated from the time of Muawiyyah. You have to have really a rebellion, an intellectual rebellion, to go back to that. At the beginning, it looks like a tall order. It's shocking. People will gasp for air of fear. Like when we started the campaign against Muawiyyah, when we noticed that there is no way, we have to break that. We have to, and we did not even started. What started is that Hakim al-Mutayri established that there is an age he called Asr Tanzil, the age of revelation, and he made it until the year 73 Hijri. And after that, the Asr of Ta'wil, which is a reinterpretation to the favor of the rulers, the favor of the people, favor of the rich people, and so on, favor of misogynists, etc. And then we say, now we are in Asr Tabdil, where they change Sharia, they don't care about, they change it and they don't bother. We regarded this as a breakthrough, but when we analyzed further, we saw that is really the problem started really at Ta'wil and Tabdil started with Muawiyyah. So the better analysis is that Asr Tanzil, at the time of the genuine, the Asr Tanzil al-Ma'soom is the time until the death of Prophet. Then we have Asr Tanzil al-Ma'qul or al-Rashid until let's say until the resignation of Al-Hasan. That's it. From Muawiyyah onward, we started Asr Tabdil and Ta'wil, both. They are mixed, they are not separated, they are not two different areas. Because Muawiyyah did some Tabdil, definitely. Did some nasty confrontational Tabdil, like the adopting of Ziyad against a clear and well-established ruling that the child belonged to the Firash. And Ziyad belonged to the Firash, his father. His father is Ubayd, and he is born on Ubayd, Firash of Ubayd. And most likely he is the son of Ubayd, because he himself said, before he was persuaded by the Shaitan Muawiyyah, he said to his brothers and to Abu Bakr, say, do you see Muawiyyah? Muawiyyah is trying to persuade me to accept to be the son of Abu Sufyan, his brother, from Zina, and I am born on the bed of Ubayd, and I'm similar to Ubayd. I look like Ubayd, but he was still alive, and people know how you look like. So he has two good reasons. First of all, he's on the bed. That's the Sharia injunction. It's absolute. Nobody can break it. And I look similar to him even. And then the narrator say, that's an isnad of the river of Bukhari and Muslim. And then say, we were shocked next year to find him accepting Muawiyah's offer and denouncing his own father and joining Muawiyah. This is clear confrontation to Sharia. That's tabdeel. That's not ta'wil. It's not ta'wil for that. Because the hadith al-Firash al-Hajar applied to people in Jahiliyyah. What's the story of the hadith, of this hadith? That when Mecca was conquered, Sa'd ibn Waqqas came to the Messenger of Allah, said, my brother Utbah, who died as a kafir, wa'iyadu billah, told me that this son of Jama'a is actually Jama'a's son. He fornicated with the committed adultery with the mother of this child, and this child is from the seed of Utbah ibn Abi Waqqas. So let me take him. The brother of this one, protecting the honor of his father, the bid of Hada, although and even Sa'd said, look, he looks very similar to Utbah. And then the brother of the one would say, no, he's not the son of Utbah. He's born in my father's bed, and he's my brother. I'm not going to accept to accuse the wife or one of the wife of my father to have committed zina or stain my father's memory with such filth. And then the Messenger of Allah, the Messenger looked at that, so it was very clear, similar to Utbah. Then he said, it is for you, Jama'a, Abd ibn Jama'a, the brother of Sauda ibn Jama'a, the wife of the wife. It is for you, Abd ibn Jama'a. It is for you, because the child belonged to the bed, the marital contract. If you who is born in wedlock, the child belonged to that wedlock. There's no way out of that, except through mula'ana. That's something else. But this is all in Jahiliyyah or Islam. So there's no ta'wil for Muawiyyah to claim that's what happened in Jahiliyyah, not in Islam. And for the fornicator, he deserves, and the adulterer deserves to be stoned by the stone. He doesn't deserve to have a child. If you commit adultery, you don't deserve the child. You deserve the child belonging to you only if you do it in wedlock. So we are not in a jungle. This is a human society. And then narration continues saying, and the Messenger of Allah looked at a boy. A boy was clearly physiologically and genetically the son of Utbah. So that the mere doubt that he may be the son of Utbah is sufficient to create prohibition. So he turned to Sauda, his sister, by name, say, Sauda, do hijab from him. He's genuinely biological. So hijab follow biological brotherhood. But he is called son of Jama'a. So it's clear. This is a story in Jahiliyyah, happening in Jahiliyyah. All the fornication, the crime, and even the fornicator, Utbah is a kafir. He died before Islam, or did not embrace Islam, and so on. So Muawiyyah have no excuse to care. Oh, this is only Jahiliyyah, it's apply only in Islam. No, so apply to what has happened in Jahiliyyah. Even if it happens now here in Britain, for example, someone have claimed something like that. A woman give child in wedlock and claim it as the father is the different one. That's not acceptable. The father is the one who is the father of the wedlock, and he carries his name. That's it.
Sheikh,
inherit from him, etc. That's I mean it does. So Muawiyyah really have some tabdeel, not ta'wil. That's tabdeel, changing the deen.
Sheikh, a lot of these strange opinions and views and like almost dodgy fatwas, you can say, are coming out a lot because a lot of these scholars are using different usuli points as secondary and third types of usul. Why don't more scholars
no,
adopt the principle of general permissibility?
Why using like which dodgy fatwa? Let's have a concrete example so the listener would benefit from it, at least to see what has happened.
So a lot of things in terms of you do hear some scholars say we absolutely have to adhere and follow by rulers and regimes today. It's very common thought view that we hear.
We discussed that already.
No, but I'm talking about the principle of general. You're very strong on the principle of general permissibility. Right? Why do more scholars not adopt that and adhere to that?
Ask them.
There's not anything in their text or anything to kind of understand this?
No. Ask them. Why they're saying? Why are you saying that? Because they didn't analyze it properly, and they didn't follow the hadith. Sheikh Taqi, for example, discussed that and mentioned the ayah. People asking, who is my father, and so on. That's true, but that's not only the case. There are people asking, is Hajj every year? And the Prophet said, then he said, if I said yes, it will be every year, and you will not be able to do it. Leave me as long as you leave you. Take from Allah his afiyah. It's also apply. And there's other hadith. Sheikh Taqi did not do it comprehensively. That's unfortunate that these usuli points were not given due study properly since Shafi'i onward. They went in esoteric things and so on, and maslahah and mafsada, etc. But they didn't establish this as a fundamental usuli point. They said the basic ruling about manafi', benefits in the universe, whatever the word benefits means, maybe things, entities, is permissibility. And they have established for themselves a rule like kullu jaf tahir, everything dry is tahir. There's not true. Everything is tahir until prove that, until you have an evidence. Jaf or liquid. So the water of a stomp is tahir. You have to prove that it's najis by smell, etc. They didn't do their homework properly, unfortunately. And because they indulged in qiyas, they did notice. They said they started imagining qiyas and things like that, and tried to compare things with other things without any. Or for example, they talk about gray area. Like I just recently was in a video. I think Yasser Qadi was asked about a little bit an issue which is a bit difficult to discuss by many people about oral sex, and this is a gray area of Sharia. There's no gray area of Sharia. So the Sharia did not address that. It does not address that. خلاص قال الله عافيته. It's permissibility. No need to discuss further. Why waste time? Allah will not aware of that. But by the way, it was there in the Arabs. But at least they were known to practice at least a section of oral sex, like sucking clitoris and things like that. And they're using it sometimes to swearing and things like that. So Allah is not aware about that. And Muhammad is not aware about that. And this man is this is not a messenger. He's just managing from his imagination. That's the only conclusion. Otherwise, what's mean gray area of Shariah? Not addressed meaning is permissibility. What the Messenger said, اقبل من الله عافيته. Allah remains silent about these things, not out of nisyan, not out of forgiveness, not because of he doesn't know. رحمة لكم, mercy for you. فاقبل من الله عافيته. Accept Allah's mercy. Don't dig there, dig yourself in a hole. But Siyas al-Qadi wants to dig himself out, call it a gray area of Shariah. There's no gray area of Shariah. There's no gray area of Shariah. Definitely, there's no gray area of Shariah.
This might be beyond this topic, but there's another thing. It's a recent.
Ask him.
Yeah. There's another thing which is quite recent, more associated with the West, and Muslims as a minority. The idea of navigating differences. So basically, to put some context to it, a number of notable scholars, Yasir Qadi, Umar Sulaiman, and all these kind of people, they recently published a statement, and it was around sexual identity, gender ethics in Islam, and it was kind of how to tread the line between them. So basically, seeking kind of common ground between causes as a minority and how to engage with people of different persuasions, you know, sexual identities, all that kind of stuff, and kind of coming with a.
For these, there's enough text for that.
But there's for example, we know for certainly that we're not going to endorse any of that stuff. However, in terms of
there's enough text for that. There's enough text for that. There are certain biological situations which a baby is born with both organs and things like that. And then nowadays with the modern science, and we have the capability of doing the necessary surgical adjustment. We can decide, because they even discussed, the scholar discussed called al-khuntha al-mushkil. The ham of what is ham for hamam? What's the word again? You gave me the word, I memorized it. I forgot. Hermaphrodite. There are something called mushkil, the troublesome one that you cannot distinguish it female and male. And then they discussed how to inheritance and things like that, because they don't have any solution. Now we have scientific solution. My suggestion is that this should be treated immediately after birth. It should be decided which one is really there will be various genetic issues and so on to that can be done when the baby is small. And
sure, this isn't necessarily this subject. So what it is basically, if you look at the West, you know, this whole idea of arbitrarily deciding on certain things.
No, it's not arbitrary. I'm just discussing it from the root. Let me go step by step. So we finish the problem from the root.
Yeah, but
in that case, it should be now we have the facilities to finish the situation by the surgical operations and adjusting the diet and hormones from child, so the child goes as a man or woman. That's number one. Secondly, it should be part of the education that Allah created from dhakar and untha, man and woman. The odd cases have been treated now, possibly treated medically or managed by law. In the time it was not treated medically, but that's clear. Later on, a man are not allowed to behave or the present himself as a woman. This is the major sin. This meaning he's not accepting Allah's creation. The same with a woman. لعن الله المتشبهين بالنساء والمتشبهين بالرجال من النساء. Both are cursed. It's a kabira. It's a major sin to try to be a woman when you are a man, or try to be a man when you are a woman. That's a major sin. This meaning you have a fundamental issue with creed. You have not been brought up in the correct creed. You have not been educated that this is how the universe has been designed to test both. Test man with manhood, test woman with womanhood. And test both with life. And test good with evil and evil with good. There's a fundamental flaw there, fundamental philosophical flaw. That's it. Period, full stop. All this is nonsense. That emerge in some people who thinks that we developed from the monkeys just by emergence. There is no God, or there's just natural development without any divine guidance or any divine pre-plan. There's a divine pre-plan. Or in atheism, then atheists will have a problem deciding that, or giving it any moral valuation. You may give it a biological valuation that's nonsensical if you have all the male organs that you wish to become a woman. Why you wish to become a woman? While you have the male organs and so on. I think it's a medical condition, even that. Even they should conclude on biological grounds that there's a medical condition. Maybe there's a problem with the upbringing, or maybe there's a sickness in the society. So they try to cure the sickness by promoting the sickness and turning it into normality. That's it. I don't see anything that Islamically the issue is clear.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing about it being clear in terms of Huqooq and our stance. The question is really around how do you engage with these kind of people? Because if you want, I can read it out. It's not too long.
What to deal with the people? The people, this is haram and so on. So what to deal? He has no right to go to a clinic and ask to change gender.
But it's more around if you're in the West and you have a common issue
in the West or the East. What to do? How to deal with the people?
So, for example, you're going on a platform, and So, for example, you have constitutional rights in the American Constitution to kind of throw your lot in with them to kind of get your rights, and they get their rights. And you
what's constitutional? What has that to do with the platform? Explain more.
I can read it to you if you want.
No. Meaning you're supposed to allow them in your platform, for example. Or no, you are not obliged in America.
These guys they kind of piggyback off the back of them to get extra to kind of like it's almost like lobbying together.
It should not be. Why use them for
allying, Sheikh? Do we ally with these people based on a common ground, or is it allowed to ally?
For example, for social justice, that's fine. What's the problem with that? If he believes that he's a woman who is a man and so on, has that to do with being a man or woman? He's a human being. So I don't see what's the problem. Give him something more explicit. For example, in a Muslim school, for example, girls' school, someone converts like that, someone converted himself or something like that and comes, they claim, we can say, sorry, gentlemen, we don't accept that. And they say, we don't get state funds. We don't want your state. Get your funds down the toilet and flush it down. We don't want. Simple. If we have in our swimming pools, we have even men and women separated anyway, so we don't have that issue. So anyone who is converted is not allowed. Someone could be with a male organ coming bathing with a woman, it's not acceptable. Just because he feels like a woman and declare himself to that, no. If you must here in the West, it's not in our control, go and remove that male organ, get castrated completely, including the testicles, become flat like a woman, then maybe you will be admitted. It's no problem. It's okay. We have to be consistent. It's simple. I don't say people made that a big issue. It's called transsexual. What means transsexual? You want to change your sex? Change it physiologically first. Really. It's your feeling. Your feeling can go to hell. We don't care about your feeling. We have also our own feelings, our own restrictions. You just go and remove these organs, castrate yourself completely, and say, I feel like a woman. Okay, if you are castrated, that's no problem. Then you are not one who have a sexual desire, and you can mix with women, and you can swim with women. It's okay, fine, no problem. It's allowed in Islam. التابعين غير أولي الإربة من الرجال, men who have no sexual desire for whatever reason, being castrated or whatever it is. Since it's allowed in the West, you go and remove these organs, that's fine. We don't care about your feeling. Some women may feel like a man, but they will never have a penis, so they can mix with women and sit with women. We don't bother about their feeling. They're physiologically and physically women. They are mahram to other women. I don't see the problem. The problem is constructed with their imaginations. There's no problem there. They constructed the problem because you have the right of change your gender, your imagination, and change. No, you have no right. If you insist on that, then remove these organs and so on. I don't see any issue there. All other issues are no problem. If someone I feel a woman and you dislike a woman and come in and we'll say, okay, you come with us in the demonstration, but be aware that I'm saying Allah cursed anyone who wishes to be a woman, although he's not a woman. And if it is compulsive, then it may need treatment. Let me say, curse someone who who deliberately want to be a woman. Someone who's not deliberately is enforced internally, there may be hormonal problems which need to be studied, or maybe upbringing, psychological problems which can't be treated. Maybe he is even not mentally capable enough to be accountable. This is the things about akhirah and so on. But I don't see where is the issue with platforms and not platforms and so on. These guys, especially in America, they got sucked in America. They don't know how to get. They got sucked in there and they are not able to get out. That's the problem. They don't know how to deal with the problem on a structured, proper way.
It all comes down to the same thing in terms of,
because they think it must be either you kill them or beat them or something. No, it's not true. That's not.
I mean, ultimately,
protected the dignity, everything protected. Even if the Messenger of Allah kills one of those, does not mean. If there was a woman in Medina who was mustarjila, she was riding horses and racing with boys and so on, and the Messenger of Allah cursed her because she was trying to be like men. And when she heard that, she ceased. He never sent anybody to punish her. Just people reported the Messenger of Allah cursed any woman who wants to be like a man. Accept your womanhood and be like a woman. Does not mean that women cannot ride horses but they do. But that one was doing it in a way to be a man. She wanted to express herself like a man. She's unhappy with her own womanhood, which is rejecting Allah's qadr. That's the reason for the curse. That's it. Nobody sent her, no punishment, nothing. Not even ordering to take the horse away from her or ordering not to participate in races, nothing. But that was very obvious in Islam, alhamdulillah. We have no problem there. The problem is in people's mind because they do not study the text and they don't go through all of these things thoroughly. And the master ayah is key. لا تتمنوا فضل بعضكم على بعض. Do not wish for that what Allah has given each of you in preference over the others. Men have been preferred over women with certain aspects, but women has preferred over men with certain other aspects. Yes, it's true. Each one has preference over in certain aspects. واسألوا الله من فضله. Ask Allah for His bounty. للرجال نصيب ما اكتسبوا وللنساء نصيب. The men will have a share for that what they have earned as men, and for the women the same applies. That's it. Very simple. Very simple. The universal creation is clear. There were odd biological cases. We don't have to treat them in the law. And nowadays, medicine will help in the treatment. And most likely, it should be done. It would be prudent to do that from early childhood, even before the baby even become conscious. So he grows as all these contact cases grows as a male or as a female, as much as possible, done genetically and medically with the participation of the parents and so on, and the medical consultation. And this done. No need to mention that to them even when they become out of age. And it may need for various surgeries over several years, slowly until everything comes in normal shape. Alhamdulillah. No big deal. That what they in the West have is a spiritual disease. Is a disease of the creed and your vision of your own reality and your place in the universe. But this is not a matter of Shariah. It's a matter of kufr and iman. It's a matter of aqidah. Essentially, it goes to matter. The disease is that of aqidah, and you should treat it also disease of aqidah, like you treat the other believers. It's very well possible that you may have. You go in a march against Israel and you march with naturalized Carta Jews who do not believe in Isa and maybe think that he's the son of so and so on, maybe, but still does not prevent that you march for this purpose.
Can you endorse their rights to express themselves, hoping to get your?
No, there's no right. It's not right. That's not a right.
So you can't even articulate that. You can't even refer to.
They can't do it. This is because they are free. They're free agents by Allah creation, but that's not given the right. The rights are given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is the one who reveals what's the rights. That you have the freedom to make a choice and to be like Iblis and rebel, refuse, does not mean that you have a right to do it. You do it against the right. You do it against Allah's command. You are committing a sin. So it can't be endorsed. No.
So not endorsed, but can you tolerate it? Say, okay, that's your creed. We're not to get involved with it.
Yeah. And the state can decide there will be no punishment. There should be no punishment anyway for that anyway. That's not an issue of punishment anyway.
Yeah, because obviously
if the state says it is the right, you have to respect it. No, we will try to respect falsehood and rebellion against God. So we can't respect you can't order us to respect the devil. We understand that he's a devil worshipper and they're marching with us against the Israeli Zionist operation against the Palestinian Palestine. But does not mean that we respect the Satanism or accept it as a true creed. It's a false creed. But you have set motivation according to your belief that making you march against the Zionist entity in Palestine for their operation against the Palestinians. We cooperate in this regard. Does not mean that you can ask us to praise the devil, or we can ask you to denounce the devil. I don't know. But we denounce the devil and you praise him as much as you like. And you will be answerable to that Yawm al-Qiyamah. I don't see the issue there. If you put the issue in the right place it is like that. The state may interfere like that, for example, like gay marriage. You are employed, like for instance, like in the conflict happened when they ordered that gay marriage should be recorded as civil marriages. And some obviously practicing Christians refused to record and so on. And they were regarded as disobedient to the state. I think they have the right to disobey. But the solution for that is to resign from that job. Because you are employed by the state, which has no secular state. It has no declared religion. The state does not have any religion. And it's law. But anyway, before that, even registering even civil marriages may have even anathema also. You should have objected to that even before that, even before gay marriage. But someone could say, okay, that's essentially approving that what the church already has enacted. Okay, we swallow that. But in principle, it should be. Or you interpret it as only a registration. It has nothing to do with regarding that as really a marriage properly and so on for the state purpose and the dunya purpose. Then it is the same like registering the church marriage or the Islamic marriage in the British system. It's just a registration, just administrative technicalities. Does not make it halal, haram, or anything like that. If you give it more value than that, you step out of Islamic kufr. And you can say, I can register that. I can register even gay marriage. It's just a registration. I'm not approving anything. I'm just in the state record say these are entered as husband and wife according to the secular state system. It will be really a tightrope sometimes. It gets up, but that's just what happens if you have a secular state.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Is there any other talking points Rash you have, or?
And the same, no problem like that happens in the Islamic State, because the non-Muslims, for example, if they have their own entity, like in a confederation, they may have gay marriage. They go just none of our business. The only thing they cannot have in their domain, according to the Najran Treaty, is usurious banking, usurious transaction, and different measures and ways, so that at least the financial interaction cannot be limited to by borders and so on. It has to be universal and international. So they have to share with us the same financial and non-usurious system, but they don't have to share with us the marital system, nor the penal code concerning sexual issues. Like Ali ibn Abi Talib, there was one Muslim man was found with a whole witness and so on, fornicating with a Christian girl, and Ali ordered him to be flogged 100 lashes, as it should be, and ordered the girl to be sent to the Christian. So give her to the people of her deen. They will manage her according to their deen. There's no obligation to flog it. According to Ali ibn Abi Talib's point of view, I think it's a valid point of view, because this punishment is for Muslims, a purification for a Muslim, for someone who believes that's permissible, or his deed is different. Purify for what? It's not a public offense. It's not like murder or theft, which is public protection, which apply to various religions, because you need to protect the wealth and so on. You can't distinguish by religion there. That's something essentially private. No, these things could develop further, obviously. I don't want to go into fine points here in detail, but it has to be studied much better than that. Obviously, for these guys, especially for someone like Yasir Qadhi coming from the Wahhabi background, is really a tall order to jump through that ocean of problems. It doesn't have the tools to deal with them correctly. But the correct tool is that what I told you. Look at it in the correct way of it. and they create such an injunction. But the Shariah injunction applies to Muslims, and the case of those who deliberately want to be women, or that they are men, or they to be men, according to the curse, or provided it's well established, and we study the hadith and so on. Just assume it's well established without. And also the ayah is clear, is they may make an injunction, not a prohibition, but it's highly discouraging that men should wish to be that to have that what Allah give women as a preference over them. Definitely, women have preference over women in many other aspects. They have exempt for many things, except for fighting. They are allowed many things concerning beautification, things like that. And men have a preference over women in very or different than women, and many other things. But they are, for example, women as preferred over men in matter of support, and when they are always supported by parents, by husband, and by the state. Men do not have that. They have to support themselves. Only in an extreme situation they will get state support after some scrutiny. It's a preference. You should not wish for that. And no amount of wishing and changing your psychology will change the reality of the physiology. Physiology go by organs and by anatomy and physiology, not by your wishful thinking. The other one is just mental disease. It's just psychological problem. It's a spiritual problem. So I think it's a spiritual problem, mostly, not a psychological. It's more a spiritual problem. It should create a vision of the reality, your self-image of your position in the universe. That's where the problem comes from. And the self-image has been smashed. The moment the church can have completely defeated, even the moral grounds, it lost even leadership. Khalas, it's finished. Sexuality has become open debauchery, become everything, and then man-woman relation became permissible. Although it's strictly prohibited, even more prohibited than man and woman relation. Then man added to that, woman added to that later, and then after that human animals, etc. It will go. Yeah. So no reference frame there to respect, just your own desires. Do as they say, the way of the devil is clear. Do as you please, then you are fine. That's a satanic way. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Fahim, I'm good now. I think I've got no further questions, Sean.
Okay. Sorry. I mean, okay. Are you okay to finish there, Sheikh?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Hopefully that's been positive, and it's been beneficial for listeners and viewers. Inshallah, we encourage you to keep going and to look at the other resources that we have available. The GitHub, the Kitab Tawheed Volume 1, to keep exploring. Those go into a lot more detail for a lot of topics that we've addressed here. So inshallah. So alhamdulillah, we'll end it there.